I'll tell you what's going to be horrible. When we take a wonderful young woman who's with a criminal, and they show the woman, and she could stay by the law, but they show the woman being taken out, or they want her out, and your cameras are focused on her as she's crying, as she's being taken out of our country, and then the public turns against us. But we have to do our job.
President-elect Donald Trump elaborated on his immigration policies and what he intends to carry out during a lengthy sit-down interview with Kristen Welker over at Meet the Press. And while he seemed to have, well, zero empathy for most undocumented immigrants in the country, he did say that he wants to work out a deal with Democrats when it comes to some of the undocumented immigrants in the country. We're gonna get to those details in just a minute. But before we do, let's hear his take on what should happen when it comes to families with the mixed immigration status. Let's take a look.
You're saying, yes, you're going to focus on the people with criminal histories, but everyone who's here illegally has to go.
I'm saying this. We have to get the criminals out of our country. We have to get people that were taken out of mental institutions and put them back into their mental institution, no matter what country it is.
The estimated 4 million families in America who have mixed immigration status. So I'm talking about parents who might be here illegally, but the kids are here legally. Your borders are.
You're talking
Tom
about
Homan.
separation?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are two aspects to this. Your border czar, Tom Homan, said they can be deported together.
Correct.
Is that the plan?
Well, that way you keep those, well, I don't want to be breaking up families, so the only way you don't break up the family is you keep them together and you have to send them all back.
So that is exactly what Tom Homan also said, and said it without any apology, any concern about how it might come across. And what's interesting, Cenk, is people seem to be cheering that on, right? And so
I don't believe it.
You don't believe it?
Yeah, so here's my thoughts on it. And I thought that interview was really telling. So let's start with the bad news and go to the good news. So the bad news is he claims they are really going to try to deport everyone, right? Now, will they be able to do that? No, I don't think they can, right? And nor do I think he's going to actually execute it. In fact, the very first clip we showed you is the most important one. I'm gonna come back to that in a second. So are they going to deport people who have criminal convictions but were, had served their sentence and are now out and in America, but they are undocumented, et cetera? Oh yeah, they're gonna definitely deport those guys, right? So, and there's no force on earth that's going to stop them from doing that. So I know that there's people on the left who are getting ready to oppose that. Oh, don't send out the criminals, et cetera. Never gonna work, okay? So that's gonna happen. And so we'll see where we draw the line on what they mean by criminals, right? And that's a very important distinction. Okay, now then they're gonna move on to the next category, and that's where the rubber's gonna hit the road. So the Homans of the world, he surrounded himself with a lot of very anti-immigrant people, and he himself is very anti-immigrant in that regard, Trump is. So when they go to deport the actual, 12, 13 million, I don't know, however many million is undocumented immigrants, then you're gonna see the pictures that he was alluding to in that first clip of people crying and
the backlash,
et cetera. Now, do you remember what happened the last time there was backlash? It took a long time, there was a ton of pressure about the kids in cages, but Trump then backed away from that policy because he doesn't like to be unpopular. And so what he was signaling there is, I'm going to try to deport as many people as possible and then see how much the American people howl. And when I think what he's saying is, when it gets in my mind that they're howling too much, I'll know I went too far. Which by the way, means that I don't think that starting maximalists is a good idea, but when they get to a point where we are all uncomfortable, okay, which will be probably relatively quick, we've got to fight back. Okay, because he's looking to see how much people are gonna fight back.
He responds, you're right, he responds to how people react to the way he implements policies or carries out policies. And you're right, Cenk, he loves validation, he wants to be admired. And look, you can see that as good or bad. There is a positive element to it. Compare that to, let's say, Joe Biden, who sees the majority of the Democratic base incredibly unhappy with the unlimited support toward Israel and what it's doing in Gaza. They didn't care. They didn't care. You see Biden's approval numbers drop consistently. Didn't care, does not care about how his own base feels about him. On the other hand, you have someone like Donald Trump who is very responsive to his base. Now, it really depends on what his base wants, but to their credit, last time around, when he was too draconian in his immigration policies and when he was deporting too many people and putting people in those cages, well, there was backlash and he did back off of that policy. So I think you make a good point there. But there was another element in this conversation that I thought I don't agree with at all. And so you're about to hear it in this next video. Take a look.
You've promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
The 14th Amendment, though, says that, quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an executive action?
We're going to have to get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it. We're the only country that has it.
Through an executive action?
We're the only country that has it.
We're not the only country that has birthright citizenship. I just want to be clear about that. This is just some of the countries on the globe, Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Barbados, Belize, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chad, Costa Rica, Cuba, El Salvador, Fiji, Grenada, you've got Guatemala. You guys get the picture. There's plenty of other countries that have birthright citizenship. Also, how do you end birthright citizenship? What does that mean? How do you become a citizen if you end birthright citizenship?
Yeah, so does it mean we end birthright citizenship if your parents are immigrants or undocumented immigrants or legal immigrants, or we end it all together, in which case nobody's American anymore when they're born in America. So how does that make any sense? So look, this was so clarifying, this interview. I get what he's doing. So he's setting the two boundaries that are kind of, there's good news and bad news, right? The bad news is depends on how your perspective. So the boundaries are, he's saying if you're a convicted criminal, you're gone, not negotiable, right? The second thing he's saying is he's giving us hope about the Dreamers, which we're gonna talk a little bit more about in a second, that he might actually do a deal about them, which would steal the Democrats' thunder, and it's actually a really great idea, and we would be happy to make sure that we protect the Dreamers. By the way, if I see any left-wing show telling us that we shouldn't protect the Dreamers because it would help Trump, I'm gonna lose it, okay? You've got to let go of your mania, okay? We want the Dreamers protected. Everyone on our side has always wanted the Dreamers protected.
Yep.
I'm not saying Trump's gonna do it. I'm saying if he does it, take yes for an answer. Stop being like, no, it's a secret evil racist plan to protect the Dreamers. Okay, now let's get to the hard parts, right? The hard parts are in the middle. So when he starts talking about deporting everyone, I think it's crazy. I think they won't be able to do it. Number two, the thing that he mentioned first where, hey, the kids are citizens, but the family, their parents are undocumented, we're sending them all back. No, you're not sending any citizens back, okay? So there's gonna be a giant pushback there, and that pushback has to be significant enough to make him change his mind. And then lastly, this ending birthright citizenship is insanity, total insanity. And he's got to actually get an amendment. You can't do that without an amendment. He seems to acknowledge that. But again, there's a little sliver of hope, because when he acknowledges that it has to be done through an amendment, that's basically saying we're not going to do it. Amendments are near impossible, right? And certainly he couldn't get 3/4 of the states to agree to that, because there's tons of blue states. And even if he doesn't know that, his advisors know that.
Right.
So they're going to push to see how far they can push. And when the time comes, which is going to be really near the beginning, we got to push back to protect the people that we need to protect.
I'm going to venture to say that the vast majority of Americans, including Republican voters, would not want to end birthright citizenship. That's crazy. Like, that's crazy.
No, totally crazy. And
because that puts your own citizenship in jeopardy.
But even if you said it, to those dirty undocumented immigrants, etc., still people are going to push back on birthright citizenship. That's not, the majority of the country is not there, and they're going to find that out the hard way, okay? But look, the one, we keep talking about this as an advantage, right? Because we're doing honest analysis. Trump is ironically more of a traditional politician before the donor class took over. Now, because of the donor class, establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats will never, ever disagree with their donors. And if you got some knucklehead on the right or the left telling you that, oh no, the donors aren't in charge, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, but golly gee, if they was the moral thing to do, they would defy their donors. That person is a fool and is showing you that, well, other than their ass, they're showing you that they don't understand politics at all, not 1%.
I think it's important to hear what he's saying here, and you're right, Democrats should take the win if he actually does pursue this. Take a look.
We have to do something about the Dreamers, because these are people that have been brought here at a very young age, and many of these are middle-aged people now. They don't even speak the language of their country, and yes, we're going to do something about the Dreamers.
What does that mean?
And
what are you going to do?
I will work with the Democrats on a plan, and if we can come up with a plan, but the Democrats have made it very, very difficult to do anything. Republicans are very open to the Dreamers. The Dreamers, we're talking many years ago, they were brought into this country, many years ago. Some of them are no longer young people, and in many cases, they become successful. They have great jobs. In some cases, they have small businesses. Some cases, they might have large businesses. And we're going to have to do something with them. And
you want them to be able to stay. That's what you're saying?
I do.
Okay.
I want to be able to work something out. And it should have been able to be worked out over the last 3 or 4 years. And it never got worked out.
So obvious dig at the Biden administration and the Democratic Party in the end. I think that that was a legitimate and credible dig, because they should have done something about the Dreamers over the last 4 years, and they did not. Now, if Trump is being real and he wants to pursue legislation to provide protections for Dreamers, and it seems like he's being honest about wanting to do that, Democrats should absolutely work with him to make that happen and not play games, partisan games to prevent it from happening. We also need to be honest about why the protection for the Dreamers ended in the first place, which was an executive order by Obama. That executive order protected the Dreamers. DACA kept them here in the US without worry or fear that they'd be deported. And then in Trump's first term, he undid that executive order. So if he cared about the Dreamers, why did he do that? So let's be honest about that.
So look, at the same time, why haven't we been able to protect the Dreamers so far? Because they're Republicans, let's be honest. So I don't think there's a lot of donor money in not protecting the Dreamers. So normally that's the one thing that inhibits the Democratic establishment from getting something done. But those establishment Republicans were dead set against it. So if Trump can make them heal, that would get rid of our giant impediment, which is the Republican Party, okay? So let's be clear about that. So to finish my earlier point, look, when you have someone strictly serving the donor class like Mitch McConnell or Joe Biden, they're never ever going to move on anything. And I think a lot of the progressives in Congress too were very naive about this. They were like, oh no, they are our colleagues and we can get them to do the right thing. And unfortunately, we were right. You couldn't, because they don't care about the policies. They only care to serve donors. That is why, does Trump care about the donors? Of course, he put the donors in charge of the government, right? Miriam Adelson gets foreign policy, Elon Musk gets domestic policy, etc. But at the same time, he's more of a traditional politician in that he actually cares about his popularity. He actually cares, hey, am I losing my base? Am I not losing my base? Etc. So that is an advantage that we could use to say, hey, if you want to be more popular, do things people like rather than things that people don't like. And that we did not have with any Democrat or Republican that was establishment, because they were absolutely immovable. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.